Everybody loves Christmas. Actually, no. During the 17th century, it was an incredibly controversial holiday. Mostly because a religious sect called the Puritans wanted to ban it. It might seem very strange to us, but Christmas in the 1600s was less like this and more like this. Let's start from the beginning. Christmas in the early modern period was a time of excess. In our modern day, we can just go down to the supermarket and buy a whole turkey. But early modern Europe was a place of scarcity. Fresh food was seasonally determined. In late summer and early fall, you had fresh vegetables, and December was the season for fresh meat. Animals would not be slaughtered until the weather was cold enough to preserve it. Outside of winter, people ate preserved meat, usually salted, cured, smoked, generally less palatable. December was also the month when the year's supply of beer or wine was ready to drink. Most people were also farmers, and in winter, you can't really do much farming. All in all, December was the month of free time, plenty of food, and plenty of alcohol. The result was absolutely chaotic. Public displays of gluttonous eating and drinking, fights, and rampant sexual activity. Demographic data from the period shows that there was a considerable increase of births during the months of September and October, meaning that the children would have been conceived around Christmas. When the Puritan grip on Christmas slipped in the early 18th century, premarital pregnancies skyrocketed in the colonies. Christmas was also a time of misrule, when social conventions were flipped on their head. Men and women would exchange clothes, the young would imitate and mock their elders, a peasant or apprentice might become a bishop. This often became an excuse for rioting. People would cross-dress, blacken their faces, or dress up like animals to assume anonymity before going out to start trouble. Most often they would go to the homes of the wealthy and demand gifts, food, drink, even money. It could devolve into flat-out robbery. These ceremonies were often associated with Christmas carols, which back then had very negative connotations, associated with rioting, wantonness, and fornication. One of these types of songs still known today is called wassailing. Bands of young men would go to houses and sing wassail for their patrons. Some of them kindly asked for food. Others harbored an active aggression, like this one. We've come here to claim our right, and if you don't open up your door, we will lay you flat upon the floor. It was just the kind of holiday favored by seamen. Maritime communities in New England were often noted for their open defiance to Puritan authority and as bastions of folk practice. We can only imagine what Christmas would have been like in places such as Port Royal, Petit Goave, or Nassau. Sailors were not always able to celebrate their favorite holiday on land. They would bring it with them to sea, and failure to do so might have serious consequences for the leadership. A common critique against Christmas was that it wasn't a Christian holiday. Puritans argued for the lack of evidence that Jesus was born on the 25th of December, and even in the 17th century, it was widely recognized among the educated that the holiday stemmed from the Roman Saturnalia, which eventually morphed into the Christian holiday. Still, Christmas was considered a religious holiday, and the Christian veneer was observed at sea. The religiosity of pirates has often been debated. Ever since Captain Johnson's General History of the Pirates, they have often been recognized as militant atheists. But Johnson's fiery condemnation tends to be recognized as a dramatization. Some pirates did behave in a profligate manner, others paid great respect to faith and clergy. Bartholomew Roberts allegedly sought a minister to hold mass aboard his ship. The filibuster Daniel even had one. He would fire salvos to mark the commencing of service, and even erected an altar on the poop deck. When one of the pirates misbehaved during service, going so far as to curse, Captain Daniel shot him dead on the spot. In the account of Alonso Ramirez, a Spanish captive among English buccaneers, including William Dampier, it is recounted how Miguel, a Protestant convert, would join the Englishmen in praying and reading from their books on their feast days, which were every Sunday in the calendar, and Christmas, indicating that pirates observed religious ceremonies. Pirates would usually emulate or even pervert the traditions of the Navy and Merchant Marine. So there's merit in looking at those communities for evidence of how pirates observed the holiday. In the Navy, a typical Christmas would begin at 4 in the morning, with the trumpeters blowing their trumpets, wishing all the officers a good morrow and a Merry Christmas. Other sailors spoke fondly of the fiddler playing and singing, for which he was gifted money and wine. Music was an important part of a pirate's life. They often kidnapped musicians to play their instruments. Their favorite instrument might very well have been the cannon. There are mentions of sailors and pirates celebrating the holiday by firing 3 volleys of muskets, or even their cannons. The music and salutes were usually followed by prayers and sermon. It's uncertain how often pirates observe this. Christmas is, and was heavily associated, with a lavish dinner. At sea, you might be served ribs of beef, mince pies, cabbage, cheese, wine and fruits, and, oh, the plum pudding. No Christmas was complete without the pudding. That is, if you were an officer. The eve of the common Jack Tar was far too often glum. Frequent are the complaints about the lack of pies and puddings, replaced instead with salt beef, often the hardest cuts like the sirloin next to the horns, to be served with a suspiciously colored butter. It was enough to make some question why they had even gone to sea. Indeed, Christmas was incredibly important for the pirates' morale. Failing to properly celebrate might result in a mutiny. After Bartholomew Sharp failed to properly receive the holiday in 1680, the crew deposed him. Same happened with Charles Swan a few years later. On Christmas he only came aboard to have a bit of food, and afterwards returned ashore. A few days later, the crew sailed off, leaving Captain Swan behind. Sharp narrowly avoided a second mutiny by means of a clever Christmas present. When he caught wind of his crew plotting to kill him, he bribed them with a Christmas wine. Each mess, about 8 men, were given 3 jars, and it seems to have worked. Compared to the Navy and Merchant Marine, the social hierarchy aboard a pirate ship was much flatter. Typically, the captain shared the provisions and conditions of his men, at least more so than the Navy or Merchant Marine. Puddings for everyone. A few pirates documented their recipes. One of Sharp's crewmen, Basil Ringrose, described the company as cooking plum pudding made from salt water and wine lees. George Shelvocke described a weirder sort: coarse flour, salt water, jerked beef, and sweetmeats, a period term for candy. This pudding couldn't have been very healthy, for it brought a distemper upon the crew. Probably diarrhea, not the most pleasant of Christmas presents. It was customary for naval officers to feast on a king cake, used to celebrate the Epiphany of Jesus on January 6th. King refers to the 3 wise men of biblical lore. Traditionally, a bean was hidden in the cake, and the one to get the bean was hailed as king of the feast. In one example of a naval king cake, they placed in it likewise a pea for the queen, a clove for the knave, a forked stick for the cuckold, and a rag for the slut. I have no idea who these characters are, but apparently they laughed a lot at the guy who got the cuckold. Many pirates expected fresh meat for their Christmas dinner. Sharp, John Cox, and Ringrose spoke of the Christmas pig they ate. They had taken her when she was still a suckling piglet, and allowed her to grow into a big and fat sow in their hold. It was the first flesh they had eaten for several months, and must have been highly esteemed. Cox wrote additionally that they didn't think the sow would be enough for all the crewmen to eat. So the crewmen purchased a spaniel dog from the quartermaster, killed, and cooked it. Pig and dog for Christmas dinner. Yummy. While we imagined the pirates eating a roast pig and dog, the shipboard hearth wasn't built for anything but boiling. Frying pans were sometimes used, but it would have been time-consuming and wasteful to slice up and fry 2 whole animals. Instead, the flesh would have been boiled in a large kettle, possibly seasoned with lime juice, salt, peppers, and allspice. They would have eaten it with boiled cornmeal, seasoned with salt, and pig's fat. If there was no meat available, a substitute might be acquired in its stead. Dampier described how they sent out 3 canoes with strikers, Indian spearfishers, to acquire their Christmas dinner. In the afternoon they returned with 3 large Goliath groupers. The fish proved so delicious that the canoes were sent out again on the following day. If the pirates had plenty of provisions, they were sure to expend it on Christmas. Captain Johnson spared no punches in describing piratical waste come the season, which might have been hyperbolic, but eyewitnesses described similar incidents. According to Richard Lazenby, a captive of Richard Taylor and Jasper Seagar, the pirates spent 3 whole days in debauchery, carousing, and utterly destroyed 2/3 of their shipboard provisions. Pirates are heavily associated with the tropics, but did they ever reach a wintry climate for the season? A lot of pirates were based out of the 13 colonies, and would have experienced a white Christmas on land. New Year's Eve was not an especially popular holiday. It seldom included more than the firing of a salute, wishes of a Happy New Year, and perhaps some nice food. I don't know if pirates ever took any resolutions. However, if they missed Christmas, New Year might be made a bigger celebration. Woodes Rogers missed the Christmas of 1708 because he had been fighting the Spanish. So instead, they made do with New Year's Eve. The weather was very poor, with high winds, gales, and rain. In spite of this, he had a large tub of hot punch put on the quarterdeck, and the officers wished every man aboard a Happy New Year. The musicians played, and they all drank a pint to their shares and those of the owners, to a Happy New Year, a good voyage, and a safe return. When they closed in on their concert ship, they gave them 3 huzzas, and wished them all a Happy New Year. As usual, thank you to my generous supporters over on Patreon. Patreon supporters get early access to my videos and can watch them without ads. And if you want to interact with fellow pirate enthusiasts, check out the link to our Discord server in the video description. Cheerio!